Hello and welcome to quiz class. Today we have 100 questions on the 1960s. So let's begin with question number 1. What did the 1967 Public Broadcasting Act not lead to the creation of? PBS, NPR, or CNBC? CNBC. What was invented in 1960 by Theodore Myman at Hughes Research Laboratories? Plasma television, fiber optic cables, or laser? Laser. What type of satellite was Echo 1 that NASA launched in 1960? Weather, surveillance, or communications? Communications. Which country did the U.S. break diplomatic relations with in 1961? North Korea, USSR, or Cuba? Cuba. Which team did not play in the first Super Bowl in 1967? Green Bay Packers, Pennsylvania Eagles, or Kansas City Chiefs? The Pennsylvania Eagles. What did the Voting Rights Act of 1965 prohibit? Racial discrimination, education discrimination, or gender discrimination? Racial discrimination. Where did young people flock in 1967 during the Summer of Love? San Francisco, Phoenix, or Las Vegas? San Francisco. What was the first handheld calculator that Texas Instruments developed in 1967? Math Tech, Cal Tech, or Pocket Tech? Cal Tech. What did the 1967 25th Amendment not clarify? Presidential succession, presidential disability, or presidential age? Presidential age. What did the Berlin Crisis of 1961 lead to in West Berlin? U.S. decreasing in military presence, U.S. establishing military control, or U.S. increasing its military presence? The U.S. increasing its military presence. Which United States president was Richard Nixon elected as in 1968? The 37th, the 40th, or the 43rd? The 37th. Where did Jane Goodall begin her groundbreaking study of chimpanzees in 1960? Tanzania, Uganda, or Congo? Tanzania. What was the 1966 National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Act focused on? American-made vehicles, the age of drivers, or safety standards? Safety standards. Which 1960 massacre in South Africa was a turning point in the fight against apartheid? Sharpeville, Fineville, or Townsville? Sharpeville. Where were the first Special Olympics held in 1968? Washington, D.C., Boston, or Chicago? Chicago. Which Disney rise debuted at the 1964 World's Fair in New York City? Splash Mountain, It's a Small World, or Prince Charming Regal Carousel? The ride was It's a Small World. The ride debuted. In which U.S. state was the first Walmart store opened in 1962? Arkansas, Alabama, or Arizona? Arkansas. Which Peanuts character was introduced in 1966? Pig Pen, Peppermint Patty, or Penny Jean? Peppermint Patty. How many people were murdered during the Manson family murders in 1969? 5, 9, or 13? 9. We are at question 20. Which homewares company expanded to Europe in the 1960s? Pottery Barn, Tupperware, or Stanley? Tupperware. What did the 1968 protests at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago highlight? The anti-Vietnam War movement, the anti-establishment sentiment, or conservative values? The anti-Vietnam War movement. Which 1967 film was groundbreaking in its depiction of violence and anti-heroes? Easy Rider, Bonnie and Clyde, or Chinatown? Bonnie and Clyde. What first transplant of its kind was performed at the University of Minnesota in 1969? Pancreas, lung, or retina? Pancreas. Where is the TWA flight center that opened in 1962? The Houston Airport, LaGuardia Airport, or the JFK Airport? The JFK Airport. What type of circuit was demonstrated by Jack Kilby at Texas Instruments in 1960? Ideal circuit, practical integrated circuit, or digital circuit? Practical integrated circuit. How many James Bond films were directed by Terence Young in the 1960s? 3, 4, or 5? 3. What did the 1964 Gulf of Tonkin Resolution give President Johnson the authority to do? Reduce U.S. involvement in Vietnam, escalate the involvement in Vietnam, or enforce U.S. military conscription in Vietnam? Escalate U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Which wave of feminism was sparked by the 1963 publication of Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique? The first, the second, or the third? The second. What type of telephone system began in the United States in 1963? Type tone, touch tone, or push tone? Touch tone. What wasn't introduced at the 1962 Seattle World's Fair? Vermont Troll, Space Needle, or monorail? Vermont Troll. What did the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act abolish? National origins quota system, quarantine mandates, or visa on arrival for all countries? National origins quota system. What was the precursor to the Internet established in 1969? SuperNet, APRANET, or LARPANET? ARPANET. Which country achieved the first soft landing on the moon in 1966? The US, the UK, or the USSR? The US. Who developed the first practical cassette tape in 1962? Sony, Philips, or Sharp? Philips. What did the 1962 Port Huron Statement Manifest outline? A vision for social change, recommendation for universal basic income, or the decriminalization of illegal drugs? A vision for social change. Which 1960s U.S. president signed into law the Voting Rights Act? John F. Kennedy, Richard Nixon, or Lyndon B. Johnson? Lyndon B. Johnson. What was the first successful kidney transplant between humans who were not identical twins in 1961? Non-identical twins, parent and child, or aunt and nephew? Non-identical twins. Where in the US in 1961 did the Freedom Rides challenge segregation? Southern United States, Northern United States, or the Midwest? Southern United States. When did the 1968 My Lai massacre occur as an event during the Vietnam War? Before the Tet Offensive, concurrently with the Tet Offensive, or after the Tet Offensive? After the Tet Offensive. What is not a name for the same United States Act of 1968? The Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, or the Martin Luther Act? The Martin Luther Act. What television show first aired in 1966? The Invaders, The Outer Limits, or Star Trek? Star Trek. What was the CDC 6600 released in 1964 the first of? A supercomputer, a fax machine, or a photocopier? A supercomputer. How many digits did zip codes have when introduced in the US in 1963? 3, 4, or 5? 5. What did the 1966 creation of the National Organization for Women achieve? Major steps in the women's rights movements, rights for women to hold government office, or income protection for pregnant women? Major steps in the women's rights movement. What time frame did President John F. Kennedy set for the first moon landing in 1961? 5 years, the end of the 60s, or 20 years? The end of the 1960s. What did the 1967 Outer Space Treaty prohibit? Sabotage of space programs, nuclear weapons in space, or sharing engineering developments? Nuclear weapons in space. What was the 1967 Our World broadcast not the first of? Multinational television production, multi-satellite television production, or first color broadcast? First color broadcast. Which 1965 riots in Los Angeles highlighted racial tensions and issues of police brutality? Bats, rats, or Watts? Watts. Which satellite enabled the first transatlantic television broadcast in 1962? TriStar, Telstar, or Thorstar? Telstar. What type of device was the first to be implanted in 1966? Artificial arm, artificial heart pump, or artificial hearing aid? The artificial heart pump. Question 51. What was not part of the route of the first Concorde flight in 1969? Bristol, Manchester, or Gloucestershire? Manchester. What 1966 act standardized daylight saving time across the U.S.? Unified Time Act, Unilateral Time Act, or Uniform Time Act? Uniform Time Act. In which city was the first U.S. ATM installed in 1969? New York City, Texas, or Atlanta? New York City. What were the first Olympics to be broadcast live via satellite? 1960 Rome, 1964 Tokyo, or 1968 Mexico? (1964) Tokyo. Which research ship was captured by North Korea in 1968? USS Pueblo, USS Pablo, or USS Pedro? USS Pueblo. What did the 24th Amendment passed in 1964 abolish? Poll tax in federal elections, right of immigrants to vote, or gender limits per state for women voting? Poll tax in federal elections. Where did the first Gap store open in 1969? San Francisco, Portland, or Seattle? San Francisco. What did the 1964 Warren Commission report conclude about Lee Harvey Oswald? He acted alone, he was insane, or he would have received capital punishment? He acted alone. What was the first Boeing 747 classed as when it was introduced in 1969? Luxury jet, balloon jet, or jumbo jet? A jumbo jet. What area of U.S. government services wasn't transformed in 1965? Medicare, Medicaid, or Merit Systems Protection Board? Merit Systems Protection Board. Who was featured on the first Rolling Stone magazine cover in 1967? John Lennon, Bob Dylan, or Neil Young? John Lennon. Who was assassinated in 1963 in a significant event in the civil rights movement? Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, or Martin Luther King Jr.? Medgar Evers. How many record points did Wilt Chamberlain score in a single NBA game in 1962? 100, 125, or 150? 100. What 1961 summit was a meeting between President Kennedy and Soviet Premier Khrushchev? Vienna, Brussels, or Zurich? Vienna. Which 1967 festival launched the careers of many famous musicians? Montreal Pop, Monterey Pop, or Moray Pop? Monterey Pop. Where was the 1966 Aberfan coal tip collapse disaster? Scotland, Wales, or England? That's the Aberfan coal tip. Wales. In which U.S. state did the Zodiac Killer's spree begin in 1969? California, Minnesota, or Utah? California. What was the 1968 San Francisco State College strike in U.S. history? The most attended student strike, the most violent student strike, or the longest student strike? The longest student strike. Which film director refused the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire in 1962? Alfred Hitchcock, Stanley Kubrick, or Federico Fellini? Alfred Hitchcock. What was the first oral contraceptive pill the FDA approved in 1960? Yasmin, Enovid, or Introvale? Enovid. Where did the first 911 emergency telephone system begin in 1968? Alabama, Maine, or Idaho? Alabama. What organ was Surgeon Dr. Thomas Starzl the first to successfully transplant in 1963? Lung, heart, or pancreas? Lung. What was released as the first portable home video recorder in 1965? The Panasonic CV1000, Sony CV2000, or Philips CV3000? The Sony CV2000. How many people watched the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969? Around 200 million, 400 million, or 600 million? Around 600 million. What medical milestone occurred in 1968 involving bone marrow? The first laboratory study in structural analysis, the first successful human-to-human transplant, or the first synthetic prototype developed for temporary use? The first successful human-to-human transplant. What revolutionizing product identification was invented in 1966? The barcode, the POS system, or the automated label printing? The barcode. What area of design was the 1960s archigram group known for, or archigram? Cartoons, architecture, or sculpture? Architecture. What communication link was established in 1963 between the US and the USSR? Direct hotline, encrypted telegrams, or back-channel embedded diplomats? Direct hotline. Who was the first Black student to enroll at the University of Mississippi in 1962? James Meredith, James Sullivan, or James Whitcott? James Meredith. In which country was the world's first ATM unveiled in 1967? The UK, France, or Switzerland? The UK. What was the Sony TCD5 released in 1964? The first portable record player, the first portable boombox, or the first portable cassette player? The first portable cassette player. Who became the first American to orbit the Earth in 1962? John Glenn, Gus Grissom, or Alan Shepard? John Glenn. Where was the first state-sponsored lottery in the U.S. established in 1963? New Hampshire, Vermont, or Massachusetts? New Hampshire. What movement at UC Berkeley protested the university's ban on political activities in 1964? The Free World Movement, the Free Speech Movement, or the Free Voices Movement? The Free Speech Movement. Who was the first African American child to desegregate an all-white elementary school in the South in 1960? Ruby Bridges, Lily Fox, or Rosie Walker? Ruby Bridges. Which march was led by James Meredith in 1966? March Against Fear, March with Freedom, or March as Friends? March Against Fear. What architectural style, categorized by raw concrete and blocky forms, rose in the 1960s? Cubism, brutalism, or modernism? Brutalism. What three-wheeled microcar was made from 1962 to 1965 by the Peel Engineering Company? The Peel P50, the Peel Wee 50, or the Peel Pee Wee 50? The Peel P50. What did Andy Warhol open in 1966 in New York City? The Cannery, the Joinery, or the Factory? The Factory. We are at question 90. What nickname referred to IBM's dominance in the computer business by the mid-60s? IBM and the Seven Dwarfs, IBM and the Three Bears, or IBM and the Golden Goose? IBM and the Seven Dwarfs. What conference in 1967 improved U.S.-Soviet relations during the Cold War? Glassboro Summit, Teterboro Summit, or Edinburgh Summit? The Glassboro Summit. What culture was captured in the 1966 film Blow Up? Mod, hippie, or punk? Mod. What popular snack was invented in 1966 at Disneyland? Lay's, Doritos, or Pringles? Doritos. What prehistoric fish was discovered off the coast of the Comoros Islands in the 1960s? Latimeria, coelacanth, or Esthenopteron? Coelacanth. Coelacanth. What was the M497 Black Beetle in 1966? The fastest jet-powered train, the fastest one-person military tank, or the fastest battery-powered all-terrain vehicle? The fastest jet-powered train. Which 1968 musical featured rock music and counterculture themes? Hair, The Rocky Horror Picture Show, or Flora the Red Menace? Hair. What was the bathyscaphe Trieste used for in 1960? Deep sea exploration, desert exploration, or mountain exploration? Deep sea exploration. What packaging innovation for food and beverages was first used in the 1960s? Tempered glass, silicone, or aluminum? Aluminum. Which Beatles album released in 1968 featured an eclectic mix of music styles? The Black Album, the Blue Album, or the White Album? The White Album. Eggs from which animals were discovered in Mongolia in the early 1960s? Dinosaurs, mammals, or turtles? Dinosaurs. And our bonus question, who sang the famous movie hit about Mrs. Robinson? Let us know the answer in the comments. Thanks for playing this quiz. We hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.